I'll be going through their bios. I'm sure many of you are aware of them, they met them at several occasions, but let me start with Ambassador Vijay Karna Kant Karna, who is Executive Director at Center for Social Inclusion and Federalism. Ambassador Kant is a former ambassador to Denmark from 2008 to 12. Currently, he is Executive Director and Research Advisor at CEIF Nepal, which is a non-profit, independent private research institution, making informed and transparent decisions about policies and practices. Currently, he is also Professor of Political Science at Tribhuvan University, Kirtipur. He is especially interested in working on marginalized communities, including Madhesis, Dalits, Tharos, Muslims, and Jatatis. He has been vocal about his discontent over the interference of China for handling internal matters of Kathmandu. Second, we have Dr. Deepak Bhatt, who is Member of Parliament of Nepal. Dr. Deepak Bhatt is an elected member of House of Representatives at Federal Parliament of Nepal. He is a member of International Affairs Committee of the Federal Parliament of Nepal. He holds a PhD from the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Previously, he served as a member of High-Level Task Force on Reorientation Nepal's Foreign Policy, headed by Minister of Foreign Affairs, and as a member of Technical Committee and Secretariat formed for Supervision, Integration, and Rehabilitation of Maoist Army Combatants. He is a visiting fellow at Tribhuvan University, Nepal Army High Command College and Management Course, Army High Command and Staff College, Institute of Crisis Management Studies, and APF Command and Staff College of Nepal. He has also participated at DKI Asia Pacific Center for Strategic Studies, Hawaii, study of United States Institution of Foreign Policy, and His Ministry Government of Nepal Security and Justice Center at University of Birmingham, an advanced level course of disarmament, demobilization, and reorientation course on transition, international, and Netherlands. Next, we have Professor Kapil Shrestha, who is a professor at Kathmandu School of Law. Professor Shrestha is a senior visiting professor at the Central Department of Political Science at Tribhuvan University, Kirtipur. He is also a member of one-year Asia Pacific Masters Program at Human Rights and Democratization, the chairperson of Nepal Water for Health, and NGO in the Water Supply, Sanitation and Hygiene Promotion, WAS, and sector in the chief editor of Nepalese Journal of Political Science and the Central Department of Political Science team. Adding to his list of contribution, he has served as the president of Nepal University Teachers Association and Human Rights Association, and was a member of National Monitoring Committee on Ceasefire Code of Conduct 2006 at the National Human Rights Commission. He has been visiting fellow and professor at different universities of the United States. Let me come to Dr. Lila, who is at Tribhuvan University. She holds a PhD in Chinese Public Diplomacy in Nepal from the School of International Relations Studies, Yunnan University, China. She is currently working as a member of China Desk for the Center of Nepalese and Asian Studies. Her research area includes public diplomacy, soft power, political and social themes. She has extensively contributed on public opinion in different newspapers. Next, we have Ambassador Dr. Shambhu Simkhada, who is a visiting faculty at Tribhuvan University. Dr. Simkhada is a former permanent representative of the UN and World Trade Organization and a former ambassador to Switzerland. One of his biggest contributions is the institutionalization of BIMSTEC. Since 2005, he has been working as a freelance consultant at a political economic advisor. Along with his freelancing, he is currently a member of Management Committee of Chiran Milan World Peace Campaign and a visiting faculty member at DIRDTU. Similarly, we have Ms. Sajana Maharjan, Amatya. I think she has joined. She is a project director at UK aid-funded Data for Development Program at the Asia Foundation, Nepal. Additionally, she is a part of the senior leadership group of the office. She served as chief of party for the 16.08 million civil society mutual accountability project, which was run by FHI 360 and funded by USAID. She has worked with UNDP strengthening the rule of law, reforms of the judiciary program, and is one of the founding members of Nepal Transition to Peace Institute, serving currently as a member of the organization board. Next, we have Dr. Uddhab Pyakurel, who is at Tribhuvan University, Kathmandu University. Dr. Pyakurel is assistant professor of political sociology at the School of Arts, Kathmandu University. He has published articles in many of the topics like marginalized communities, international affairs, gender-based issues, conflict, to name a few. He has contributed many articles and books, while also published in national and international papers. Finally, we have Nishant. Nishant is the president of Nepal Democracy Foundation. Earlier, he has worked with National Democratic Institute and Millennium Challenge Corporation. He has designed and implemented various democracy and legislative programs with a special focus on political policy, strengthening parliamentary support, civil society development, and supporting free and fair elections. Mr. Nishaant is a Stanford Fellow on Democracy, Development and Rule of Law and a noted media personality. He regularly contributes to Nepal's leading newspaper on current affairs, politics, international relations and development issues. Over to you, Jay.
Now this is basically my conundrum. So maybe do you have a list of other speakers somewhere? Maybe I will. So we are starting at 4:10 and we have to end at 6 o'clock.
Yes.
So that means we have 110 minutes. We have 110 minutes, and how many speakers do we have? 1, 2, 8. So I would suggest that each speaker keep herself or himself to about 10 minutes, and then I think a good way to work would be to actually. Yeah, I mean, if you can restrict yourself to 7 minutes, that'd be better.
Yeah.
Because then we can actually get a lot of conversations within the panel and with the audience. So maybe 7 to 8 minutes would be perfect, but don't exceed 10 minutes.
I can keep the time.
You can keep the time. You can keep everything very nicely. So I know how you manage my time to get here, so we trust you. So then all the speakers have been introduced, and I will therefore announce the names of the speakers in the order that they are mentioned here. So I think the first speaker is Ambassador Vijay Karna. Would you like to speak from the audience, from the podium? Yeah, podium would be fine. Just one short remark that if some of you have been present at my presentation here today, it would be helpful if you let us know how you find Nepal's democracy in contrast. If you can have some reflection. Nepal's democracy in contrast. So
there are a lot of contrast. Thank you, Professor Rahul. Thank you, Pramodji, for inviting me such a important discussion on the status of democracy in Nepal. So I have a small notes which has to be reduced by 7 to 8 minutes. Thank you. So what are the good thing? First thing that we have a constitution, we have a 2 local elections and the parliamentary election, and then we have a second parliamentary election going to be held. We have a to some extent vibrant media. Compared to India, I found that earlier I was very pessimistic about the Nepalese media, but now compared to Indian media, I can say that ours is the better at the moment. Jagdishwar became very happy. There's a lot of journalists here. So I can say that there are some challenges on domestic as well as foreign policy. The first thing, the crisis of representation linked to undemocratic party politics and illicit political finance. The major challenge is the business groups, corporates, and what is called bicholia. What is in English? Yeah. So these are the political party and leaders. The major challenge. Second thing is the unequal relation between market, the people, the state, the people and the state. The market is controlled by the corporates and the people is the rest, and the state is helping the corporates, not the common people. That is another big challenge which is creating unequal relations among the people, and which is making some people richer and some people poorer. And this is the way that the government is doing the distortion of the state market relations. So the cartelling system of some bus, market pricing, and other many of the prices are being done by some of the cartel groups of the some products, and this is. And then centralization of power versus federalization. During the first government, Khadga Prasad Oli government, he has tried to control all the state mechanism in the hands of Prime Minister, which was a big challenge from the Intelligence Bureau, from Home Ministry to Prime Minister Office, from two of the most prominent intelligence, finance intelligence agencies, from the Finance Money Laundering Department, and another one is a Revenue Investigation Department. There are two shifted to the Prime Minister Office. So, and then trying to settle centralization versus federalization, that the power which has the constitution transferred to the state and provinces and the local body, the government try to make the bill decisions on the different headings by the parliament as well from the central government. They use, like the central government is working as not a federal state but is a unitary state. So what I found that almost 80% of the bill passed by the Nepalese parliament is against the constitution and against the federalism. And some of the bill which is a very controversial, which is a very lifeline for the federal system, like the Civil Service Act, like Nepal Police Act, this is not yet not passed. And for me, Nepalese constitution does not recognize Nepal police for law and order. It's the duty of the provinces, but yet not transferred the power and police, law and order to the state government. And there are a lot of issues like economic issues, the tax issues, so many issues related with the centralization, then government trying to more centralized than the previous constitution. And then undermining of the public and national security interest. This is important thing that some national security interests under the government, some of the issues like the border in the north and south, some of the issues related with the foreign policies when we voting at the United Nations, our behavior has been very contradictory to a democratic countries. We voted for against the Human Rights Commission, against the human rights issues of the China. We supported Hong Kong, and we make a statement against the democratic movement of Hong Kong, which is not a part of Nepalese foreign policy, which is another challenge for national security issues, and there are a lot of other issues. And another major challenge is the corruption. Corruption from Prime Minister office to all the government mechanism is a big corrupt institutions. And decisions, policy making decisions and other decisions are made on the basis of money. And this is not only during the Khadga Prasad Oli government, but this government also. This is the rampant corruption in almost all government mechanism. And then there are foreign countries which is to bribe the Nepal government authorities to making the decision in their favor. And I can give you example of the Pokhara Airport. Pokhara Airport, which has been a 100 million project, we signed a contract in 206 million, and now with the loan is 216 million. Our estimate that when it's completed, it will be around 224 million. The earlier estimate, the Nepal government done a research, and that was said the 100 million project. But when we signed with the Chinese, it became 206 million. So it's not only the internal corruption, but the external corruption also, and the foreign countries bribing our leaders. And same thing with the Budi Gandaki. You have the example. Budi Gandaki is a very good classic example of that. The one government came to give China, another government came, and it is 3-4 times coming and going. It's something like that way. So it's a same thing with the Bodi Gandaki also. And then capture and hallowing of the out of rule of law institutions, trying to capture CIA, trying to capture money laundering department, and then revenue investigation department to threaten the democratic process, democratic leaders and the bureaucrats. So these are the things we found out that then. And then there is a foreign power which is playing a very important role in uniting the parties, trying to make a front of the Communist Party. So Chinese government very actively working on this matter since a long time, in 2017 also, and at the moment all the Chinese dignitaries visiting Nepal, trying to make the Chinese Communist Party either alliance or that. And this has created another big challenge for us. And then there are our neighbors on foreign policy front. What I found that our bilateral relations became a concern of other countries, and they are trying to influence our foreign policy decisions through different way. It looks during the MCC ratification, we found that how China was playing the role. Our intelligence report, when I was talking with the security official and defense ministry, we found that our security intelligence officials gathered a report that one of the Chinese intelligence officials stationed here in Kathmandu and trying to build anti-MCC campaign in Nepal. And this is not my view. Then defense minister called me and we discussed at the defense ministry. And that's why it's the public government report. Although I don't have, but he shared with me and it came in the media. So these are the things that although we are earlier talking about that India is playing a micromanaging our domestic affairs, but now it's in the Chinese, which has been playing a very important role in Nepal's domestic politics. So this is another important thing. Now, one point I would like to make, that the constitutional order in a very difficult stage. The president of this country is trying for a dual government. She is trying to play foreign policy stage, as well as she is trying to overlook the parliament, government and people at large. Although our constitution does not allow her to play active role, but she is trying to play active role. Just I will give you 2 examples. When Chinese foreign minister Wang Yi was on the way to Kathmandu, just 3-4 days before, she interviewed by the Global Times, where she criticized the Nepal government on BRI. And Nepal government, when I asked the foreign ministry, they said that they were not aware about this interview. And the second time, this time just recently, she has spoken on the global security initiative by the Chinese, which the Nepal Prime Minister and Foreign Minister both asked her not to be the participant in the conference. But just this week, I think, this week she spoke on these issues. So, I found that it's something that the dual president and government, Singh Darbar and Sital Niwas, are trying to compete, and the president is trying to interfere in the Nepal's government affairs. And what we found that these are the issues which, and then her behavior, the participant behavior, she is trying to manage in president office, to manage the party conflict, to managing her old party and other party activities. She inviting army officials on the advisory role, which is not the constitution allow her. So she is trying to create an institution, active role in politics, which our constitution does not allow, and even the country like. So these are the major challenges for Nepal's democracy. I have time? Pramod?
Thanks so much.
No? So just half minute I can say that these are the problem. I said that there are a lot of things to tell, but due to constraints of time I cannot. But one thing that the illicit funding is a major source of power in these countries. The business people trying to buy the seats from the political parties, which will be ultimately create undemocratic status. I can say you that in the parliament, there are some of the bills could not be passed, and it's a Nepal, for Nepal it's a challenge because of the corruption issues in the United Nations system. Some of the laws, because of the business people do not allow to pass the bill in the parliament. So some 3 to 4 bills lying in the parliament which need to be come as an ordinance. Nepal has to meet this deadline even I think in October, because Nepal is participating in Asia Pacific anti-corruption body, so they have given some deadline for Nepal so that Nepal would have to manage this bill. It is not passed because of the business people, bankers, contractors, and then a lot of people are in the parliament who are the member of finance committee, contradictory of the interest, who are the member of finance committee, and in the finance committee they do not allow to pass the bill. So these are this is very important thing to check all the behavior of the political parties, so that we are going for the election. So in this election we must be hopeful that although our proportional representation list is very difficult one, but we must hopeful that maybe after the election these things will be discussed in the House. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Karna, because I think the elections are going to come, and so your advice is very, very important. I think you have pointed to the impact of business, attacks on federalism, and on the usage of presidential powers. So I think the conversation can continue. We have Dr. Deepak Prakash Bhatt, who is a member of Parliament, who will now make his remarks. Thank you, Dr. Prakash.
Thank you, Professor Mukherji, Chair, fellow panelists, and respected all. Thanks to NICE family. NICE is doing nice job with single eye. And thank you, Pramod. And it's interesting to see you all here, and within short notice I can manage, and it's because I tried to hear Professor Mukherji, but I was a bit late. But as Professor Karna was talking about the Federal Democratic Republic and 5 years of experience being a parliamentarian can say some insights, but no need to say, because he was pointing all the chalk points, and especially when talking about the federalization of the security institutions. Yes, all 7 provinces, they discussed over bill to have a provincial police, and they tried to put pressure on the center, but the parties at the center, the leadership, the mentality of the leadership, all party, especially the major 5 parties, time and again they remain in power, but they are not to change themselves in that sense. But still we have conducted the second local election, which is achievement, and now we are going for the second federal and the provincial parliamentary election. So this will settle down the political framework of the federalism, I mean the political democracy. And with that, how the coming provincial parliament will will put pressure to introduce provincial police. I mean, establish the structure. Though several times we have discussed with the senior police officials, retired officials, the security community, strategy community, and being a person, attached or working in the security and defense area, I tried for that, but it's not there. So political democracy in a setup, but in terms of economic, the democracy is agreeing very closely with Professor Karna. Yes, corruption is the biggest problem. Governance is completely is a big challenge, not only at the top, but even at the ward level or the municipalities, whatever kind of rural to metro, and then in the provincial to federal setup and civil society. Wherever you see the governance and the corruption, that challenge has become a big sense of the economic democracy. In the sense of the economic democracy, yes, the biggest challenge is the corruption. I see that. And third, in terms of social democracy or the social part, inclusivity in the constitution has empowered the different weaker sections. Agree or disagree, but I see that in the last 10 to 13 years when we started, we call it the quota system and the reservation, yes, in the Public Service Commission or in each and every sector, in the parties, in the parliament, representation of the weaker or the marginalized section is there. So in that sense, we can say our social democracy in terms of participation is encouraged or empowered. I mean, we can say that, like many comparisons can be made and many questions can be there. Like today we can see that who are in the PR list, again, the powerful leaders and their family members or corporates or whatever. But in terms of that part, it's there. But in economic terms, if you look at the import and the export, 80% and the 20%, completely imbalanced, and then that is hampering to the whole ecosystem in terms of trade, in terms of, particular sector, we can talk about agriculture, industries, it's very weak in terms of contributing to the national GDP. So economic democracy part, that is very weak, and no efforts by government in last 5 years in the federal democratic structure have given that priority, and that is the weakest part now. And in terms of media and all this civil society, I see it is very, media is completely, compared to Indian media example, as Professor was talking earlier and the questions were put forward, I see the media here is very strong, but the civil society in a gamut is very weak. We don't see any pressure, like Professor Kapil is here. When people of their generation, they came to the streets, was a big shot, was a big pressure to the politicians and all, for all. But now, the phase is like completely diluted, and the civil society as a composite is very weak in Nepali context. So that part of the democracy is weak, I see that. And media is yes, but the corporate surveillance capitalism, I should say that, is very strong, becoming strong, and gradually that is grappling the political parties and media houses. Sometimes it is can be seen in the slogans and the roads, and that is, few cases we have seen in the near past. With these some theoretical or the practical things that I have experienced in this parliament, closely watching what's happening outside and what happened inside. That is my experience. So with the time limitation, I will stop here, and if anything, query and question, I can be happy to address in the second phase. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. For your comments, which also connected with Ambassador Karna's comments. So I think we have some take home regarding corruption, federalism, and the like, which can come up in the Q&A session at the end. Then we have Professor Kapil Shrestha from the Kathmandu School of Law for his comments, please.
Oh, very good afternoon. I'm extremely privileged and honored to share some of my views amongst our very distinguished panelists and very distinguished and very interesting audience here. It's indeed a unique occasion for us, and your coming to Nepal has become an occasion to come together. All of us, we Nepalese here, I think we have been meeting here after a long, long time. And thank you for giving us that occasion. So I think sometimes Indians, from wherever they come, whenever they come with good message. Thank you. So, talking about Nepali politics, from both academic and civil society spectrum. How do I look at it? I have been observer and participant in Nepali politics for more than half century. Very closely observing. And I have known many important dead and living politicians, some of whom are already present here. So, what I think is that the type of the political changes, the type of the political challenges that Nepal has experienced, especially since 1990 and after this, say, 2006, mainly following this so-called People's War. I don't know what is this justification till now. Well, it has resulted in tremendous change. So, what we have witnessed in Nepali politics and society during the last 22 years, what I find is that, yes, this last quarter century, I'm not talking about this. So we have been witnessing a prolonged transition. It never seems to end. My father used to talk about this transition. My grandfather used to talk about this transition. I'm talking about this transition, and my daughter is also talking about this transition. And it seems it's going to take a long time before we are coming to some juncture. So this has been an unprecedented transition and transformation. Our Nepal has never witnessed this kind of huge transition and transformation within very short period. No, everything has changed. Nobody ever thought that Nepal would become a republic that easily, without shedding of blood. Our king, I have many differences with him, with whom I used to play some hockey. He was my senior, and his younger brother was my classmate in university. We studied political geography together. But still, he gracefully quit the throne. Well, he may be doing his own work, his own politics. That is his freedom as a citizen. I don't mind. And so, then, about politics, what we find is that we have also been experiencing multiple paradoxes and contradictions. So much of paradoxes, so much of paradoxes. The whole constitution, it has 308 articles. Like lawyers used to say, some political scientists used to say, Indian constitution is also very huge. It's a lawyer's paradise. Our constitution has also become a lawyer's paradise. It doesn't give answer to many of the jigs and problems that have confronted us, including, and this has encouraged people like Oli and his close friend or his close associate in the past, the present president, Vijay, to indulge in their own wayward thinking and wayward activities. So, and then, because of this, we have also experienced multiple crises and multiple breakdowns. Not one crisis, not one breakdown. And so, take for example, now we see that President doesn't mind violating the Constitution. Prime Minister or Prime Ministers don't mind disrespecting the Constitution. And we have been trying, in the process of trying, not one Chief Justice, several Chief Justices of Supreme Court in an impeachment process. And inconclusive ones. But still, the resiliency, the stability of the system has managed to survive. See, if, say, during Panchayat times, if such a crisis, such a, say, challenge to resiliency would have taken place, I'm pretty much sure that Panchayat system would not have survived. So, democracy has that kind of survival capacity. In Panchayat, during Panchayat time, if few people used to be killed in the street demonstrations, it used to create a huge crisis. But here, so many people have been killed. 17,000 people have been slaughtered. And more than 1,000 people have been disappeared. But still, people have accepted this political system with some reservation. They are not looking for its alternative. They haven't found alternative. And they are not thinking about alternatives. And those who think about alternatives are people without any credibility. Yeah, I'm coming. And so, and then see, since last 30 years, we have had 6 elections, and now we are going to have another national election. And interesting thing about elections are that, see, no single party have been voted twice in next election. First, Nepali Congress was voted to the power, and then UML secured a bit small majority in that hung election. Then Nepali Congress again came to power, and then after this peace process, Maoists came to the power, and then in the election, Maoists became just third. Nepali Congress came to the power, and then in the last elections in 2017, UML secured almost 2/3 majority. And now, in this November 20 election, I'm pretty much sure, and people are predicting, and all poll pundits are predicting, that UML is going to lose. Because, because there is this grouping. No, this is something I'm not going to, since my time. And so, I'm not, and about human rights. We must admit that Nepal is comparatively open and free society. We can walk, we can, whatever, see, we have freedom of expression, freedom of movement, freedom of opinion. Nobody is going to intimidate you. And we have more than 50,000 NGOs and civil societies. However, our human rights is characterized by double standards, hypocrisy, and human rights duplicity. And it is reflected in our approach to transitional justice. Transitional justice is the process of seeking truth and justice to resolve the conflict, post-conflict issues. And we have adopted fallacious process which seeks to ensure impunity to human rights violators, and this has damaged Nepal's credibility and image in the international fora. Finally, another thing that civil society, we have both, as said, that we have both watchdogs and doormats. And former watchdogs have turned into doormats. I don't know why, because they want to be close to the power, mainly Mr. Oli, and mainly Mr. Deuba. No, it has been, like Nani Palsiwala, celebrated Indian lawyer, once used to say, in India, in Indian context, an intellectual is he who knows which side of the bread is buttered. So Nepali is no different from Indian. So, and finally, the thing that gives us much satisfaction is that we have been witnessing unprecedented awareness and assertiveness among the hitherto marginalized and excluded classes, groups, and the people. So, a new history, a new narrative, a new dynamics of history, political and social process of churn is taking place, which people in the city like us don't understand it very much. Thank you.
So I think there's continuity and change, and with all the problems, I think democracy is resilient. So the next speaker is Ambassador Vijay, is Ambassador Shambhu Ram Simkhada.
Because I know it's not easy name to pronounce, so I quite understand.
I have a South Asian Shambhu.
Yeah, he's elder version of Mahadev.
That is what makes us so close, even the name, and then now, of course, having met you personally here. Mr. Chairman, very distinguished members of the panel, very distinguished audience, ladies and gentlemen. My recent book, Triumph and Trauma of Transition, best reflects many of the things I'm going to say in this short time. Obviously, this transition has some very triumphant parts. In political terms, politically from what we practice, the divine right system, to democracy, and now what our constitution says is socialism-oriented democracy, secular federal democratic republic. Now, systemically, this political transition has been quite dramatic and significant. For instance, a very long Hindu monarchic order replaced by a secular republic now. First a constitutional monarchy and now a republic. From a highly centralized unitary state to its current federal structure with 7 provinces, 77 districts, and 753 local governments. So in principle, a hereditary system of governance replaced by citizen's son and now a citizen's daughter as the head of the state for a fixed term by the people. So it's a 250 years old representative of that monarchy holds a press conference and says, if this is what the people say, when the parliament turned Nepal into a republic, he said, that's fine with me, and just walks out of his palace. And by the way, no violence. A vicious and violent insurgency transformed into a peaceful competition for political power through a homegrown peace process, and over 22,000 rebel fighters integrated a small number into the national army and large numbers rehabilitated.
About 1,500.
Yes, into the community, rehabilitated. I do not know if the litany of political scientists present here have reflected and researched on the first and only, in my knowledge, popularly elected Marxist-Leninist Maoist government in the world. Advocates of state capture by violence today are, at least publicly, some of the biggest defenders of peace
And even this democracy.
and democracy, and in partnership with a historically centrist democratic force. Now, despite these very dramatic and very significant development, I remember recently all the big leaders of the political parties were sitting like this, and we have a well-known journalist who asked very impromptu questions. So he turned to the leaders and said, "What have the people got?" And these leaders were pretty much quiet. Why? There is a sense that despite such a significant transformation, that in fact the change has been so power-centric that in fact people also feel the trauma of this transition. There are several aspects to this traumatic saga. One is, of course, the debate that we had in your lecture, and what I said, in the sense that somehow, when we talk about Nepalese status of Nepalese democracy, what is the benchmark? And there seems to be a big question on the very nature of politics, from the classical, based on ideals and principles, to a power-centric politics. And as a result, the famous quote by John Adams that in democracy, happiness of the people is the end of the state. My definition of the status of our democracy is happiness of the people in power is the end of our democracy. It's not the people in general. So that excessive power centricity has diluted the achievements, especially at the political parties. Second, as a result of that, is a crisis of political economy and governance deficit, which makes people feel very angry. A result is the recent local election, a rejection in the main city centers of the traditional political parties to independent candidates. There are several sides to this process. From one, as a diplomat, one of the biggest issues I find in this transition, of course, is the federalism is a good idea. It brought people to the local levels, but then the structure is so heavy, top heavy, that in fact the division between our fiscal management and fiscal sustainability is being questioned in terms of the relationship between general expenditure and expenditure on development. Another very serious issue is this internal division and what I call problem of change mismanagement, which leads to what the professor was talking about. When you talk about the peace process, the transitional injustice that prevails even after so many years, that those who were affected by the conflict, their problems remain unaddressed. Now this internal dissatisfaction and division, in the nature of our location in a very highly sensitive geopolitical context, makes ourselves very vulnerable to external demands. And that is one of the most worrying points of our political transition. When you said you wanted some idea about how does Nepal's democracy compare in terms of, with India, there's only one word I can think of. In India, at least, you have very clearly a competitive authoritarianism. If there is one single word I could characterize on the status of democracy in Nepal, it is uncertainty. We stand on the verge of tremendous uncertainty. And that is why this management of our transition, so that this comes to a meaningful direction from the coming election, is in fact the most crucial issue for all of us who are involved in it directly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
I think the debate is progressing very well because from a variety of points that have been made, I think a clear contrast has been made between the success of democracy and the uncertainties that brings, but also the extent to which it is performing in terms of governance. I think this is a good occasion to clarify the debate. I think it is coming a lot of presentations, and I think we can have a debate on this. And the next speaker is Dr. Lila Nyaichyai from Tribhuvan University. She has a PhD on Chinese public diplomacy in Nepal. That's very interesting. Dr.
Thank you,
Nyaichyai.
Mr. Chair, and all distinguished guests, panelists, and their audience. I would divide my opinion into two parts. One, the positive side of Nepalese democracy, and the second is the gaps or the negative sides of our democracy. I will be limiting myself after this new constitution's democracy. It's not going back from that date. What I see after this new constitution, we are seeing the regular elections. During the last local election, one journalist was asking to me that why many youths are giving the candidacy during these local elections. And I observed that it is perhaps due to the regular kind of elections that that gave them a chance or gave them a thought to be participated in the politics. And it's one of the good point that youths trying to put their effort, trying to be participated in the politics, to be a decision maker. So it could be the one positive aspect that give us after this new constitution and this Nepali democracy. And the very good thing that we are less religious and less communal than in compared to India, as we are seeing. So we are more tolerating society. That's what we see. Though in the first constitution making movement, there we see that so many movements regarding ethnicity, regarding language and geographical area, there were too much kind of movement protest was there. But gradually we see that such kind of hard and fast division between the communities, between the ethnicity is less. We find this kind of thing. Though, I must quote this though, that much of the high ranked leaders and the high ranked, how to say, the positions, Sachiv or secretaries or in the army, those are Brahmin and Kshatri, still they are covering the positions. So after this new constitution, the concept of the decentralizations are more aware about it. Peoples are more and more aware, and they are demanding for the more decentral power. Though we are having trial and error kind of thing, we have such kind of how to say, the unfulfilled wishes that we have in our society. And regarding the democracy, I would like to judge the democracy in terms of politics, in terms of social value, in terms of culture, in terms of economic rights. All of the sectors should be included in the democracy. Otherwise, we will not be able to enjoy the real democratic society. From that light, I would say that from the political side of the thing, that Nepali democracy wish for the stable government, which we could not get. This is the huge gap. Even after having so many unstable political situations, we desire to have the stable government. Within the ruling party, they got this huge conflict and they dissolved the government, which is the very sad part. And we couldn't get the stable government. And in the name of federalism, the practice of federalism, it's not much encouraging to us, because there were so many lacks of rules, regulations, and bills. Laws were lacking. Before formulating the law, there was a provincial government. They don't know what to do and what not to do, and local provincial government are just receiving as a burden, extra burden for people that we taxpayer need to pay our money, but that was not fruitfully being utilized. Our democracy is continuously being lab tested kind of things. We don't know where we are going, as previous speaker said, that it's a kind of uncertainty in our case. I agree on that. And in international relations, our country, our government let this country be buffer for all the powerful countries, for all the powerful neighbors for us, which is very disturbing and very, how to say, the danger in this geopolitically vulnerable situations. And the third thing, the internal democracy for the inside the political party is weakening every day. Once in 1950s, when the political party used to be recognized as the initiator of the change. Now I think political parties are being identified as the dogmatic and the hurdle for the change. So this is the controversies that need to be more than, I could say that rather than very commonly said political parties, we could say that the central head of those political parties are acting as the hurdle for the change. And people every day, we know the international airport is busy just for our immigrants to go abroad. just with my friend Reshma, we are talking. One storyteller was worshipping with the god and asking that let not my son be passed the SEE exam, so that he could not leave his country, his father and mother, and go back to settle in some other developed countries. This is the tragedy of our society. So this democracy doesn't let our parents or let our society be united. And we are, after this democracy, we are gradually, accepting others' culture, others' value, other societies is much better than us. We are not being ready to accept our valuable to follow. This is the weak part of our democracy. And as we said that in the absence of foreign money, civil societies are inactive to work on it. This is the very weak part of our democracy. And as in Indian government, Indian democracy, the professor has presented here, that we have also very weak opposition in the parliament, in legislations. Every political party would like to join government. They are not accepting the value of being the good opponent parties in the parliament, in the democracy. All of them want to join the government. This is the very weak part of our legislations. And here we have honorable parliamentarian as well. I could say that embassies are more heard than parliamentarian. Parliamentarians are just counted as a number. So there are so many things that we are feeling like the wearer knows where the shoes pinches. There are so many pinches and pins inside our shoes, but still we would like to have the hopes, but uncertain, the cloud of the uncertainty is too dark. Thank you.
Good.
I think Dr. Nyaichyai has also highlighted some of the factors that enter into that debate, which is making it more lively. I think the next speaker will be Madam Sajana Maharjan Amatya. It seems that she has a lot of experience in handling foreign funding for non-governmental organizations. So her, considering the way in which I dealt with the Foreign Contributions Regulation Act in India, I think her contributions can be very comparable to what is happening in India. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Respected Chair and all the respected panels and the guest over here. Good evening. Though he has said that I have long experience working with the donor funding, I agree to that one, but my talk today will not be focused on that one, but I'll talk more about the democracy and my experience working with Nepali political leaders and the civil society over here. And what I saw in this spectrum, that would be my focus over here. So I'd like to talk about my perspective around the democracy. Are we still a democratic country? That is where I want to start with. So when I want to start with this one, then I was looking and thinking about this for a while and thinking about the structures, institutions and agencies that we have been working with. Are we really working towards strengthening the structures, institutions, or are we going towards the direction of agency, strengthening the agencies? Maybe that is where Mr. Chair's discussion about strengthening agencies come in, when it is more donor driven. That is seems very negative, but that is the fact of the nation. So that is one. And when it comes to for me, when it comes to democracy, the other thing that I see about is the periodic elections that we are having. And I agree to Dr. Nyaichyai when she talked about election being one of the opportunity for the youth to engage into the politics. And that gave us, because we are a democratic nation. So when I question in the beginning that are we still a democratic question, then my own question actually gets answered when I see that there is room for new independent candidates, new parties to come and fight for the elections over there. But But like if it goes like well into the spectrum of women and marginalized community, then again it gets questioned. Like in the first Constituent Assembly elections, we were super happy that we got 32.8% of women represented into parliaments. And when it was there, then the women actually tried to voice out their differences, because those were the voices that were within them for many, many years, because they wanted to make a shift in the system. There were caucuses, they were having discussions, and this is where the funders actually helped them to strengthen their voices as well. But what happened at the end, you all saw that. Though we worked like hard along with them as a funder, as a friend to them, then few of the things are enlisted over there. We have to say the laws as institutions are now within the constitution, but now if you see the 2017 local elections and if you compare it with the 2022 elections, then what we see, the thing that we thought that we achieved during that direction is also getting derailed. And what happened is like women are not getting like more space into this spectrum. Marginalized are getting like now struggling, and they have to fight with those so-called actors to get the tickets to the elections. And even when they get the elections, then they have to think about the money, muscles, and motorbike that they have to arrange to get into the election, to fight the elections. And then like if you turn around, then you realize that maybe you got the election, you got the ticket only it's because it's written in the constitution, but not because these people want to have an inclusive democracy in the nation. So then the other thing that actually comes to my mind is like when we talk about democracy, when we start working about the implementation, now my own experience of implementing projects says that if you think that something is not working towards the direction that you think, then turn around, review, revise, and devise a new path. But do we have that space in our democracy? What has happened now is like we are so much agency driven that when I had several rounds of conversation with the youth leaders in Nepal, saying, especially after the 2022 elections, that lots of independent candidates were winning the elections, mainly in the major cities, then I was asking them, is it a challenge to the like multi-party democracy system that we have talked about? Then I see like maybe in the second tier leaders there was no fear at all about this one, but I do not see that fear in the young generation of leaders as well. What they have to say is like, for the change in the system, we need something like this thing, but this is not going to change the way the so-called major political parties work over here. And then when we talk about the senior leaders, like second tier leaders, then I see that there is no fear at all, again. So, which seems it is not just challenge to the political parties or not just challenge to the structures that we are talking about, it is actually the challenge to the civil society. So where is civil society failing then? I was reading a book, Why Civil Society Failed, right? And then I started thinking about when the civil society movement started back in 1990s, especially when it was flourished, then there was a notion that we have to do this, we have to do that, we have to like set these institutions, we have to have these like systems and practices. Now slowly, like together with the wave of the civil society, especially after the 2006 April movement, and when the Constituent Assembly was elected in 2008-13, and then we moved into the curve of 2015 to have our constitution, then the civil society also swayed away with that river, and then civil society now started thinking that we need to be in the political power if we want to like get recognized for what we have done. So for the civil society leaders who used to be the leaders, who used to drive the political parties, they started thinking that my reward being in the civil society and driving this whole movement is to be in that power of political leadership, or that power to be in the political spectrum. So if we're gonna devise the civil society's roles in that way, then how the stream will flow. That is my whole fear, and that is what I witnessed when I worked with my earlier project, which was more about working with civil society and media for the accountability. To some extent, maybe like I failed, right? When I was writing strategy every year, then I used to have consultation with lots of like civil society leaders, and they told me this or that to do, like how to make a shift so that democracy gets strengthened if the civil society is still stronger. There is a strong checks and balance between the civil society, by the civil society. Then the strategies were taught, and like maybe I also get swayed away by their convincing opinion. Then end of the year, when I try to see that, then the things are not moving an inch further. Then I realized that I was also like actually made one of them thinking that like they are telling the truth but not. So this is where the civil society failed. And that is where I do not agree or disagree at the current moment, so quoted unquoted, that there is hasty generalization saying that donors are killing the civil society. It's actually the civil society's aspiration to be in that political seat, a political leadership as the reward to the works that they have done to the society. And the other thing that I want to talk here is about this. Our constitution is progressive in many other ways as well. So we had secularism, we had federalism, right? When we talk about like inclusive representation, then maybe like our constitution is one of the best constitution. I used to defend it for a while. Now, when the elections are coming near, then I'm saying about the coalition debate and where is it leading? Do we still get to see that many number of women in the leadership that we are seeing till now? Or now they have to take the side of the proportionate representation and there would be a separate canteen in Singhdarbar saying that this is the PR canteen. Do we agree to that one? Is this the democracy that we are looking for? So what I'm trying to say is like, though we fought for like inclusive participation in the democracy, though we fought for equal representation in the democracy, federated system in the democracy, our democracy is working more and more towards like agency driven. So I think like as per the structures, we have good structures, like our parliament is good, right? If we see the bureaucracy, we have the cream of the society. It's not easy to pass the Public Service Commission's examination. But when they go into the spectrum, then this is where the cream gets lost. If you see the judiciary, like I started my career way back working in the judiciary and reform of law. So I used to respect that. But slowly working with them, my respect actually faded away. Same as my respect faded away with the politicians. Deepak is not here. Okay. So slowly, like when I started early into this career, I was so much like happy that I'll get to know like lots of people who are like the policymaker and who are going to change the society. But together with the work, together working with them, slowly like with this last like half a decade, then this my whole thought actually faded away. So where are we moving then? So mostly we are moving into the agency driven. So that is where I want to link with the second generation leaders when they say that all the parties have the standing committee, central committee. They have different committees to decide and have the democratic practices. But what happens at the end is like nothing is decided from those committees and those are given to the so-called leadership. And the failure of this leadership, youth leadership, the failure of the civil society, the failure of the second-tier leaders for not coming into the consensus politics to save the democracy is actually championing this whole thing called agency-driven democracy. And maybe like we are waiting for that Godot who will actually drive and make a change in the democracy, and we will say that now democracy is our certain democracy, not the uncertain one. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Amatya. I think this is a very clear point that you've made, that the movement produced democracy. People have said that it was a very peaceful transition. But increasingly it has become both agency driven, and secondly, institutions are failing. And thirdly, civil society has to be blamed for its own incompetence. I think these are very, very important and clear points which connect to the other presentations. So with that, we move on to the next speaker, who is Dr. Uddhab Pyakurel, and then we have the last speaker. So I think if we can keep to the 8 minutes time, that would really leave some time for discussion.
Thank you, Professor Rahul, and welcome as well. I could meet you maybe 2 months back in your station in Heidelberg. And thank you, SAI. I couldn't see Frederick. In fact, he invited me rather than Nice. That is why I tried to look at him, but I didn't find him.
Fever today.
Oh, sorry. Being second last speaker out of 8 would be sort of privilege because kind of status of democracy has been analyzed in a very broader manner, I guess. And I'll be having some points together with Professor Rahul and trying to compare this situation according to my understanding. I also believe formal democracy won't be having that much danger in Nepali territory as well. I'm saying formal only. And I have some similar ways of understanding on that as well. For example, India was Hindustan, meaning this Hinduism with plural concept was a bit there as an integral part of this very social aspect. And for many, we are taught and we are told that we are Asali Hindustan, conceptualized by Prithvinarayan Saha. Meaning, definitely I could say negatively that we are still a caste society out of that Asali Hindustan. But again, I could say that we are a bit plural, a bit diverse than that of kind of this Hindutva narratives being popularized in South Asia. Having said that, I could discuss maybe sometimes regarding, I think Professor Rahul also tried to give kind of gesture about or difference between Hindutva and Hinduism. And for me, Hinduism is a bit more liberal, more plural, and that will also coalesce with sort of democratic norms and values. If I compare two situations, I think kind of broader perspective has been there. Definitely, if you see 2 years down the line, I don't think that there are differences about status of democracy in India and Nepal. For example, you were talking about the NGO movement, we were having lot many restrictions and all of were in the street to contain that very regulations. It was supposed to be done by left-led government as well. And definitely there were other things. Vijay Karna has already mentioned how this former Prime Minister tried to centralize power. Generally in democracy, separation of power is kind of essence, but our Prime Minister tried to concentrate power on him, definitely him. None of women is a Prime Minister as of now. Still I see a bit darker part regarding Nepal because of the couple of things. Number one, for example, in the initial years after Indian Constitution was promulgated, they were having at least very pragmatic leadership for a while. That is how I think I could list out, for example, to democratize society. That very Nehruvian era does lot many things. For example, you refer to Article 370. And I could also go through a couple of initiatives. For example, autonomous councils, autonomous hill districts, lot many things with autonomy, rights, and etc. to the marginalized people. That is how I think in the initial years they try to create kind of foundation to make it acceptable to the people. And while doing so, they could also bring people like Ambedkar to be chair and promulgate this constitution. Kind of acceptance was ultimate motto of that very politician at that time. But in Nepal, unfortunately, definitely constitution is far better constitution than in India. I think we all agree, according to the letter. In spirit, also we could say that a lot many changes has brought into by this constitution. But the fundamental problem we could see could be the day we promulgated constitution, then onwards we have had problems. For example, while promulgating, we tried to avoid a bigger section of minority not to acknowledge this constitution, and without reading, maybe half of the hill and valley population clapped in like anything, accepting this constitution, and the condition was because somebody has opposed, that is why it might be good for me, without reading. But eventually that very section who was opposing this constitution largely accepted. Then who were for this constitution started throwing this reservation against constitution. And those who were in power, for example, as I mentioned, Nehru, like people could be here to materialize or implement this constitution, so that I think we could have very rosy picture, rosy state of democracy today. But the day our this election was completed, then onwards problem started. For example, first election and first prime minister, you could see the prime minister only. I think we have not forgotten this situation. He took oath of prime minister before taking oath of member of parliament. There was no this parliament, but he was prime minister. How? No one questioned. Neither opposition party, definitely as you mentioned, nor civil society. We were overwhelmed by the very term stability and prosperity. That was the slogan of that very left alliance, without being critical. Even I have some Professor Shrestha is my guru. He taught me political science. I also have some reservation about kind of words he used. Definitely transition and instability are integral part of democracy. If we refer to kind of instability we are referring to, for example, change of government according to the process is parliamentary exercise. The day prime minister lost his or her majority in the parliament, he or she has to resign. That's the rule of the game. It's democracy. I don't want 5 years term prime minister within this democratic system. But we again feel like these are the issues. For example, this instability. Definitely, prime minister's change is not instability. We couldn't say this to our young generation, to those who are commoners, who have had kind of penalty in the name of this stability, prosperity, and etc. That is how day one we have new prime minister together with new constitution. We try to avoid this constitution. We try to go away with this constitution by a prime minister level or president level, and we kept mum. That is how I think problem started. Now, that is how kind of compilation of problem we could see were due to this. We didn't try to follow the spirit of democracy. We didn't try to follow the rule of the game. Having said that, I could say that, for example, there are a couple of very good departure of this constitution. I think all of us have mentioned. For example, this federalism. Definitely, federalism is the spirit of constitution. But the government came after the election was too anti-federal, you could say, and the mandate of that new election was out of 7 provinces, 6 provinces went to that very party, which was very much, at least leader was very much against this federalism. That is how it couldn't move ahead. Come to secularism. I agree. I was reading one book by Christophe Jefferlot, French political scientist, who could come and speak right here in this dais also, I think some years back. He was narrating how he was towards the point, even Congress regime was towards this Hindutva from the 70s onwards. Many verdicts were kind of against the spirit of secularism. He mentioned this, and in our part also it was the case. We have not accepted secularism even by the leadership and by the even people. For them, secularism is related to their personal conduct, which is not. Basically, secularism is the kind of aspect for the state, but they try to feel like, oh, if secular country, then I may have to lose couple of things which I am supposed to do. I think that is how also we could convince. Come to the inclusivity, I think we have mentioned how quota has been being distributed. Yes, definitely. I was also fond of discussing about this mixed electoral system, because we are better than India, and I could say that broad kind of inclusivity in our parliament. And at least for women, there is insured 33%, but talk about marginalized community. It is disastrous, and the way this PR system is kind of made, even in this election, I think it has become more mockery. I used to teach saying that both FPTP and PR, both are elected because I voted for. That is how I try to acknowledge and let people accept both the election system. Definitely it is, and I argue for this. But the way it is being implemented today, for example, it was for the ensuring of the marginalized in the parliament, but it tried to be hijacked by the dominant caste or class today. That is how I think there is also a problem. Coming to the republicanism, I think it is very good idea. Yeah, I'm completing it. But you see, everyone wanted to be the monarch after chasing out that monarch in a peaceful way. And you could see, those who are in the power, we have seen two presidents after this republicanism, and both the presidents were happy to enjoy power, not only in that president's house, but also in the street. People are afraid of having them in the street rather than saluting them and going for the felicitation. And that is how it goes beyond not only president but all leaders. That is how I think spirit-wise we are very good, and still I believe saying that definitely we don't have this challenge for formal democracy. And why I am saying so could be, even during the panchayat, kind of formal election could happen. Yes, definitely there were some criterion for the candidates and etc. But it was there. My father, grandmother also had opportunity to vote. But whether that will be translated to the deliberative democracy, that is the question. And for that, I think we also, as I requested my professor Shrestha, we also have to accept a gradually evolved definition of democracy. We are not majoritarian one.
It's evolving. It
Yeah,
always is
yeah,
dynamic.
yeah. And we have to rethink about very concepts like this prosperity, stability, etc. as well. Prosperity for whom? Stability for whom? And whether it will help us to democratize our society. I think if we don't go beyond those kind of heavily valued terms, I think in the near future also, even if we have new constitution again after revolution, I think we won't be having democratic spirit in the country affairs as we believe. I think. Thank you very much.
Peter.
Thank you, Dr. Pyakurel. I think now we have come to our last speaker. He's certainly not the least because he's quite a dashing public intellectual, Mr. J. Nishant. People have taken 10 minutes, so you should certainly take 10 minutes. but try to end by 12. Then we can have at least some.
Looking at your eyes, I can very easily say, oh, one more to go. Don't worry, I won't take too long. Respected Chair, distinguished panelists, and everybody who is present over here, I will follow the strict instruction of the Chair. He said, have some contrasts of your democracy to that of India. So I would like to limit myself to the contrasts and maybe a couple of comparisons. And as popularly we say, that the grass in the neighbor's yard is always greener. And we are never happy what we are having, but we are unhappy because somebody else is having that. Modi is the 14th Prime Minister of India. And I could feel, and I could also read the subtext of the chair when he made his presentation, and he was expressing some kind of anxiety and jittery that maybe Modi will continue again. Modi ji is in his second tenure, and he is worried. And we were worried because Oli ji, despite having almost 2/3 of majority, could not get his 5 years tenure. So he is worried because Modi might rule for too long, and we were worried because Oli could not rule even for the time that he was allotted for. So that is one contrast that I may have for your notice, Mr. Chair. If you look at India's constitution, almost everybody, be that Mr. Osauddin Owaisi to Akhilesh Yadav, to Rahul Gandhi, even Lalu Yadav, and forget about Modi and the others, they all swear by their constitution. They say that this is the constitution. We go by the constitution. But in our country, as it has been just expressed by my former speaker, that despite having 7 constitutions in 7 decades, we are still not happy with this constitution. Just when this constitution was promulgated, that was not signed or ratified by about 10% of the members of the Constituent Assembly. And they were in the streets and more than 100 people were killed. So 7 constitutions, 7 decades, we're still not happy, but they are having 1 constitution for last 7 decades, and everybody in India is very happy despite it has a huge diversity factor. That's another contrast. He was talking about the mercurial rise of Ambani's and Adani's. Let me give you a data. If there is one individual in the year 2021 who has earned the maximum in the whole world, that's not Jeff Bezos, or that's not Bill Gates, or that's not Elon Musk. In the year of 2021, if there is one individual who has earned the maximum amount, that is Mr. Adani. But looked like he was not happy. He looked some fishy affairs in the process. Whereas in our country, there is a businessman who claims himself to be a Forbes billionaire in dollar terms, whereas legally from Nepal, you can't take away even a single dollar to invest in some other countries. So the charisma of our businessman, no businessman in your country can match to that one.
And he's second term parliamentary.
And he can choose the party that he wants to be representing in a way he wants. Earlier he was representing my good friend's party, he was a parliamentarian. Then he became the parliamentarian of Nepali Congress. This time he is contesting election. So Adani is nothing comparing to him. You can't invest even a single dollar outside legally from this country, but he is a Forbes billionaire in dollar terms. So that's the kind of charismatic people we have in our country. And because of these kind of people, I think we are forced to change the very definition of democracy where Abraham Lincoln said, of the people, by the people, for the people. Over here we say, of the corporates, by the corporates, for the corporates. It's the corporates who you can find in the parliament. It's the corporates who you can find deciding the terms and conditions of tax and but the tariffs in our budget, and it's on the basis of those corporates that our political parties and the politicians do contest the elections. He was worried that there is something called electoral bond. It's a kind of very tricky affair where somebody buys the bond, goes and deposits it. Only the election commission and maybe the State Bank of India can know that from where the money came and from where the money went, and nobody knows it. Last one to know is the general public. In Nepal, we don't worry about those formalities. Our big business and corporate house owners just walk with big suitcases in the political parties' offices, billions stashed into that one, and nobody cares about that. So that's another contrast to the kind of politics you have and to the kind of politics we are having in our country.
It's open society.
It's very open society. You worried that there is Hindu nationalism, and over here there is a growing momentum that why this country is no more a Hindu state. The party that is officially declaring its manifesto to be restoring the Hindu statehood as its formal manifesto item is gaining momentum. I won't be surprised if that party gets into the parliament crossing the threshold of 3%. That's the kind of drive I can see being created here in the political market. So he worries there is a Hindu nationalism, and we worry that there might be a Hindu nationalism, and a lot of persons say that why not that Nepal again go back to its original, the Hindu state that it used to be at one time. Over there is a kind of worry in India that because of Mandal Ayog, the scheduled tribes and scheduled castes perhaps are getting too many opportunities in the job market and where not. Whereas in our country, in Nepal, if we talk about the status of democracy, the kind of reservation that is there in our parliament is almost to ensure that those who have been privileged all these past 7 or 8 decades must get the maximum. So in our PR list, 30% goes to the Brahmins and Kshatris, against whom the entire country fought that there should be an inclusion factor in this country as well in our constitution. So at this stage, if anybody is enlisted in our PR list, the first one they want to worry about, okay, how many from Brahmins and Kshatris? So 1/3 will go to them, and if there at all is my turn coming or not, if I'm not a Brahmin and Kshatri. So there is a kind of reverse reservation in our constitution. I don't know if somebody is enjoying it. And also he said that the foreign contribution
And
is
there is
choked.
Samadeshi Ayog which contains only Brahmins and Kshatriyas.
Exactly.
The report was against quota.
Yeah. And he said that foreign contribution is choked by this regulation. Sir, for a population of 1.25 billion in your country, and the population that we have only about 3 crores in our country, we have about 32,000 registered NGOs. So you have a problem that not too much of dollar is pouring in your country, and we have a problem over here that too much of dollar is pouring through these non-government apparatuses or mechanisms. That's why we call these NGOs not the non-government organizations, but they are reduced to be known as the dollar-making machineries. I hope Sajana is not too angry about that. So these are some contrasts that I wanted to have for you, Mr. Chair. I have enlisted one entire page, and I wanted to solve all the democratic problems of this country today itself, but looks like I am not permitted this time. But if at all I have to come up with a solution without going too much in detail, the mother of all problems is the political party itself.
Not father. There are very few mothers in political parties.
They are the ones who had created all the problems, and unfortunately, they are the solutions as well. since they make the rules for themselves, they will never do that. So unless and until the political parties are better managed, practice internal democracy, keep financial accountability and transparency, there is a term limit for the party president and the other office bearers, also a term limit for the prime ministers and the ministers, this country is not going to move an inch forward in terms of having a better democracy. That's why I would like to say that if at all there has to be a reform starting, let's start reforming our political parties. That's perhaps the only way we can move forward. Thank you.
So as we were expecting, I think we had the fireworks and we got both contrasts and a solution. And also Mr. Nishant ended within 12 minutes, so I think he sort of overdid all the parameters that were given to him. So I think with that we have ended our formal discussion here. And if there are people who want to ask questions, maybe I will collect one or two. We don't have so much time. Yes, please identify yourself.
Hello, good evening. My name is Nawaz Lama, and I just work as a researcher. And first of all, thank you for all this talk by all the panelists. And basically, I would like to thank Dr. Jaiswal for such a wonderful panelist over here. Basically, the panelists consist of parliamentarian, he's there, parliamentarian, scholars, and even representing so many organizations, and also the ambassadors and everyone. But actually, I just want to put a comment. Maybe there's some my kind of understanding. We heard 8 people talking over here, all the panelists, and every one of us, almost every one of us, blame the politicians and the political parties, right? For the whatever chaos that's happening in Nepal, I don't belong to any political party and even not a political person, but still, now I think we also need to see from our side, are they only responsible? Aren't we responsible? We also need to see from that angle. Basically, Ms. Sajana told that it's a kind of a donor-driven, agency-driven, but you are working in that agency, right? And also, Parliament, he himself said it's a political parties, they are not doing, and he himself is the person who makes the law. And over here, we're just blaming other people. So when we are pointing towards the political parties and the politician, aren't we responsible for that? And what we can do that? Basically, we number of times we just participate in this kind of forum, talk to people, and most of the times we just blame the political party. And we're sure that there is no Oli, there is no Dahal, and there is no Deva over here, and we'll just blame them and we'll say that that's the end. No, I think it's a now very hard time for us to see from our own side. Whatever has happened till Nepal till now, how much responsible am I for that? If I personally say that, okay, I'm not responsible, I'm very clean, and they are the one who make a dirt out of it, I think that's the mistake. Even we ourselves, I personally believe that even I am responsible for that. So how can I change? Even I should do that. So I think even being the panelists over here, all the things, we're expecting that. Okay, this is the situation of the country, I belong to this group, this category, and I think I am responsible for that, and I am doing this. And even others should do the same. I think we also should go from that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah.
So it's not a question but a commentary. So is it entertaining?
But make it brief. If it's a comment.
It's only a couple of minutes. So when we talk about democracy, what we need to understand is demos, or the general will, or the people should have a voice in how the governance really works. So what I see in the status of democracy is the demos, or the general will of the people, is really muzzled in the context of Nepal. So what you have is, it first starts with enfranchisement, then it comes down to political consciousness. For example, more than millions of people are living abroad and they are not getting to vote. There are migrant workers who are not getting to vote. And is there voices that is not represented in the parliament itself? It's in the policy level, it's in the structure level. And then we have to talk about political consciousness. But what we need to understand is millions of people, even 1 lakh government officials, are not enfranchised. So in this context, what we can see is the voice of the people is muzzled. And when the voice of the people is muzzled, we don't know the extraneous factors are coming in. Then there comes the things about corporates. Then there comes about donor agency. There might come other extraneous factors that are using this muzzled voice of the people and planting ideas over there. So for the first step, or the solution to strengthen our democracy is to strengthen our enfranchisement system. Then go towards developing a political consciousness. So that the governance that's happening over here is guided by the will of the people, not the will of corporations or other people. So in a structural level also we need to work towards in the policy level we need to work towards ensuring such enfranchisement. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, I think there were just two questions, and I think Professor Shrestha wanted to address. Yeah.
So about this excessive criticism of political parties, or say even demonization of political parties, I think number one, first is this self-righteousness is part of human nature, number one. And number two, but political parties are getting the peg or are being criticized because till 1990 people consider them as catalysts of agents of the change and transformation. However, during last 33 years, they completely failed to fulfill that aspiration. And so, now that there is no king, now that there are no punchers, people need some punching back. And whether good or evil, political parties have become a convenient punching bags. And political leaders, they are aware, but they have become so thick-skinned that they haven't thought about changing the conduct. Now, this is not only in Nepal, this is in India as well. In India, it may be even worse. You see, politicians with big tummy. So suddenly, yeah.
So that's one response. Any other responses? Yes. Okay.
I thought if it was sounded like this, we're sorry, but I try to understand from different perspectives that we try to even self-criticize ourselves. For example, if I mention saying that even I criticize my professor, don't use this, because the way we try to use it may be giving kind of leverage to the political party to have authoritarian. So that is how we try to reflect on our own as well. That is why I think if it was sounded like this, but it was not our intention. For you, I think yes, definitely labor migrants, yes, but this civil servants, they are having voting rights. Only in PR, only in PR, but yeah, that is what, at least they are having voting rights.
Just to add on, like Dr. Pyakurel has already addressed this. So if we sounded more like, if I'm saying that our system is so much donor driven, but actually not. What I'm trying to say is because we have forgotten, or we are away from the track of what we are trying to say, then more of this perspective or those narratives are coming into this spectrum. Actually, this is something it's like a faith, right? Because if you're not working, then somebody else is working on your behalf. That is what we are trying to say.
Thank you. Just to remind you one thing, you were rightly said that the political party be criticized. I recall one event when King Gyanendra took over the power and imposed authoritarian regime. So we organized the interview of the Dr. Mathura Shrestha, doctor and human rights activist, with him and another human rights activist, Mr. Padmurad. So what Dr. Mathura did was he heavily criticized political party. And we all agree with the Dr. Mathura that today is not the day. And after the interview, we said, Doctor, you don't have to speak like that. No, today I have to speak these things. It was very rightly. And you know one thing, civil society organized a mass meeting I think some of them might be remembering at Baneswar, we invited all the 7 political top leaders and keep them waiting and listening about 5 hours. And that is what civil society can do.
That was during the movement.
Yeah, during the movement. Everybody remember it. So that is what researchers, scholars, we do write, we speak. Dr. Jaiswal is trying to send the message, our message to all Dal, Khadat Prasad Oli and Sherbahadur Devbhai and many of the leaders. Well, but sometimes they listen. I remember just one year back, the same program organizer at the Parliament House, and we raised the same question, very harsh question, to all these leaders who are in the power today.
Police.
Yeah, all 5
Except
coalition members.
KP
No, he was at the time in power, but all those who are in the movement. And we asked them and tell that, look, this is our responsibility all the time to come to the street for you. Why did you make some all mistake? And everybody committed. No, after that we will not commit any mistakes. But we are fully aware in the same day there will be going to be mistake and again. But our duty is to telling them and continue telling them. That is what the civil society and media scholars can do. We write books, we publish articles, and that is how we communicate the things. Thank you.
Yeah, so this has been a real learning for me, and I hope we will end at 6 o'clock. I think it's been a learning because we've got a diversity of views across this table, which is very, very important. And at the end of the day, I think I must say that both political parties and social movements are very important.
Yes.
So you must understand that the Indian National Congress was built around a social movement, right, which was an anti-colonial struggle. And there was the context of a constitution that the British gave in 1935, which is the Government of India Act, after which there was some kind of representation. And then, of course, there was politics between the Congress and the Muslim League. Now, if you look at the colonial struggle, leadership was very important. So the Indian National Congress had a very tall list of leaders, and many of them were reasonably selfless. They contributed to the creation of the nation.
Yeah.
Similarly, whether you like it or not, the Bharatiya Janata Party also evolved around the leadership. There was the Hindu Mahasabha, then there was the RSS, then there was the Jan Sangh, and then after 1980 there was the Bharatiya Janata Party, right? The Bharatiya Janata Party had 2 seats in parliament, I think, in the early 1980s. I remember the great American professor of Indian culture, meeting him when I was a student in JNU in the 1980s, around 88 or 89. Professor Ainsley Emery said, have you thought about the rise of Hindutva? And I was a student in JNU. I said, what is this bullshit that's being discussed? This was not very far away from the demolition of the Babri Masjid. So obviously on the ground, there was a lot of work being done to produce another idea of India. Now you can't reject any idea of India. It has to be fought in the political battle place. You may disagree with it, you might think that it goes against the constitution. There was the Ayodhya judgment, which was very interesting because it exonerated a lot of people who had actually were supposed to have performed the crime, which was the demolition of the Babri Masjid. And then the judge actually gave a verdict which said that a temple can be constructed on top of a mosque, but there will be more land given for the construction of the mosque. And the basis of that judgment was Hindu mythology, right? So whether Ramchandra actually lived below the Babri Masjid.
We also claim that Ramchandra was born in Nepal. According to our
and there are many places in Ayodhya where you can claim that Ramchandra was born, right? So, and I personally respect. So I was actually asking a very, very influential RSS activist who calls me and talks to me for hours, and then After about 4 or 5 hours, he begins to accept what I say. It takes about 4 hours of talking. And so I said, look at your Ramchandra. There was, when he was fighting this war with Ravan, what did he do? Did he kill Ravan the moment Ravan became, without weapons? When he lost his weapons, did Ramchandra go and kill Ravan? Or did he tell Ravan that you get your weapon and I'll fight again? So he was very surprised because his RSS ideologues had not given him this interpretation of the... I said every time Ravan lost his weapon or it got out of his hand, Ramchandra said, you get it, I am not going to kill somebody who doesn't have a weapon. And when he was killed, according to the mythological story, Ravan himself wanted to be blessed by Ramchandra. And I said, that is the story, that is the myth of your civilization. He goes and listens to his father, who has made a commitment to his stepmother. And when his father and his mother are both saying that this is not a commitment that you have to respect. But he says that my father made this commitment and therefore it is my commitment as well. Now this might sound very traditional in a modern sense, right? But this is the extent to which a mythical figure was committed to what the father said. And this is the extent to which a mythical figure was actually committed to a certain understanding that warfare should be humane. So the point I'm making is that these narratives, these ideologies are very important, around which you can actually build political parties. The Congress Party had an ideology, the RSS has an ideology. And if you have these ideologies, of course these ideologies will interact with pragmatic political reasons. And that's why sometimes you hear that Mr. Modi is sacrificing the ideology because he's too concerned about power. You hear that also, that people in the RSS are not happy with him. So I think this entire question of building political parties is very, very important. But equally important is the question of society rising to contribute to the making of a political party and to rise as a social movement. And the farmers' movement recently, for example, it showed to the entire world. You may disagree, you may agree with the farm laws and not with the farmers. I'm not getting into that debate. It is true that it was not a national movement. It was just farmers of two and a half states, Punjab, Haryana and Western UP. But they were able to take on the might of a party. But no political party could take advantage of it for the same reasons that you mentioned. But because these farmers actually said that we don't want to be a part of any political party because we'll get finished. So this question of political party, as I think a number of speakers here have, is a very important issue. I think Mr. Nishant ended with the question of the political party. And I think your question also is a very, very important one. But I guess the clock has ticked beyond 6 and every good thing has to end. I thank Mr. Jaiswal and all of you for your generous patience, and I have certainly learned a lot from this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Ambassador Vijay has given me a huge task of taking this message to Prachanda, Uli and others. I think it's very challenging, but maybe if we all try, maybe you can attempt at least. Thankfully, he has not asked me to change the whole system because I'm really incapable to that. I think this whole process, there is a need of role of media, civil society, academia, and everyone. We all have to come together. And democracy is an evolving process. It's not overnight that things changes with a switch or with an election or with one big protest somewhere in Mandala or somewhere. So I think it's an evolving process. This debate also has to continue. Maybe we'd love to have Sai often here in Kathmandu to educate us, exchange ideas and all. At the end, I'd like to thank all our distinguished participants, speakers, guests, a wonderful audience for this kind invitation, coming on a holiday, on a biggest festival's first day. I'm really honored. So I wish you all happy Dasai, enjoy your festival. And thank you everyone. Let's join us for high tea. Maybe that will be the start of the festival. Thank you. Thank you.